is that moment when I'm going to ask some of the jury members to come to the stage, and I hope this is going to work. We left some flexibility in the plans. So I'm going to ask James Noes, Patricia Rogers, Rachel Lee Nabors, Robert Delwood, and Swapnil Sapar to come to the stage. Then thank you for joining. And again, thank you for your amazing work as jurors. Although I'm saying a lot of these words, but these are mostly your words. I'm just sometimes seeking in my opinions, but mostly it's coming from the jurors. I'm going to call you one by one, but with one question, and take it anywhere where your thoughts leading you at this point. What is your expectation post integration on a dev portal from support and troubleshooting? And if you go to a portal for support, in your experience, what are those typical good intentions of the portal makers that are actually working against you? I see Swapnil nodding a lot, so let me call you first.
Right. So, just to intro myself, I am that developer. In real life, I do produce a large set of APIs and integrate with them hundreds of times. So, I would say, based on your question, the very first rule is don't break the integration. After the integration is complete, most devs don't wake up to see what's latest on the dev portal. They go about their other task in the queue. So don't break the integration and don't break the trust of your developers. And this is true even when you have the new shiny V2 of something. Make sure that your V1 contract is intact and supported as long as it's needed. From the support point of view, I would say, okay, communicate disruptions early. Be honest about the status pages, incident updates, RCAs. Reach out to your customers, reach out to your developers more frequently with respect to that. Proactive communication is key. When devs report issues, acknowledge and triage proactively. Give them some tracking ID so that you can communicate. Leverage AI, and bots can help there too. And finally, I would say build trust. Forget the developer marketing. Just deliver the great experience. You and your users and your developers will spread the word and bring their friends along. And that's how that's how I think you can win long-term loyalty with them.
Rachel Lee, what do you think? And thank you for joining.
Could you restate the question for me? I had an audio issue.
Yes. Once an integration is set up and you have to go to the portal for with a support problem, or you have to troubleshoot something, what are your expectations? And what are the things that typically go wrong, although with good intentions?
That's a good question. For me, one thing I notice time and time again with people using the dev portals is the tendency to look for a troubleshooting section. Whenever there's a problem, people look for a troubleshooting section. I personally hate troubleshooting sections because the information is very hard to sort through. Much more useful is to, I don't know if you can hear the music. I'm actually at a conference today, so it's got conference vibes both here and behind me. But things I look for also include, I love a public support channel that is referenced throughout the documentation, where you can find links to, people who have been having this problem and having it solved by real support folks in sort of like a private Stack Overflow type situation. That lets me know that how frequently this problem is coming up, what other people's issues are, and how they've supported it in the past, and builds my confidence in the company as well, because I can see them solving people's problems in public. So that's sort of a souped up troubleshooting section. Another thing I have found invaluable, not just for me, but watching others, where AI can be helpful, is AI debuggers right there where you're using the tool and the product itself. For instance, on Pipedream, it's kind of like Zapier, but for nerds. will use this little AI debugger next to the scripts that you're using. Found it so useful for doing understanding a stack trace using multiple products together in ways I wouldn't have. So it's not just about troubleshooting and supporting people using your product. The challenge is now, how do you help people use your product with all the other products out there? Because it gets harder and harder to hunt down where these kinks in the system are. And no amount of FAQs is going to be able to account for every single case. So solving it in public with a very robust integration between the support team and the documentation team, and even leveraging AI to help decode some of these things as they're happening in the tool itself. Those are my favorite solutions to this problem so far.
Thank you, and have fun at the conference as well. Let me ask James next. You probably come across many support questions simply because of the number of clients that the portal has to support. What is your experience here?
Yeah, so I really like the previous comment around don't break the integration. So love that, right? So support's kind of like a last option. So I love the idea behind, making sure you have a good status page, because that should be the first thing, right? If all of a sudden my integration stops working, I want a place to go to say, where's the problem, right? So I'm gonna actually take this a little bit in a different direction and say, even like when you're integrating with the API, as it relates to troubleshooting, there's an interesting dynamic between, are you doing good error handling of the APIs? And then what is the DevPortal support? And if you're not doing one well, the other one's got to step up. And if you're not doing that one well, then the other one's got to step up, right? So if you have terrible error handling and terrible responses in your errors on your APIs, well, guess what? Now the team that supports your DevPortal is going to be feeling the pressure to provide, twice as much support. Whereas if your APIs are intuitive, right, now you might find that you can get away with having a significantly less on your DevPortal regarding support, because when you're integrating with the API, the errors are actually literally walking you through what you're doing wrong, right? Oh, got this error. Why? Oh, there's a good reason. Fix that problem. Oh, new error. Why? Reason. Cool. And so, in my opinion, if you're integrating with an API and getting multiple errors, if you have good error handling, you have good reasons for the errors, you might not even need to go to the portal to get to the root of the problem, right? You shouldn't have to go to the portal to get to the root of the problem. So that's kind of a different direction I wanted to take it. And then in terms of, what's not really working, just to build on, the community forum too, that's one thing I find problematic as well. I think they're great, but also when they're just totally unmoderated, I find that I go to a forum and there's 12 different options, right? People posted, well, this worked for me, this worked for me, this worked for me, right? And there's not one that says hey, try this first, right? So, I've definitely found situations where I've had to try multiple different things because there was conflicting information in a community forum and it wasn't clear to me which one was the right one. So I think it's a great thing, but I think if it's not well maintained, it can also start to actually create a negative experience as well. So.
Thank you. Patricia, you are in a very different situation in your professional life because your portal, let me go out on a limb, are serving only large B2B clients, right? So you probably have to provide a different type of support?
Yes, we do. Yeah, our users are businesses that are using our financial data APIs, and they're long-term users. So we have fewer, but they're long-term users. That's right. Thinking about your question about post-integration, what kind of help will people be looking for with troubleshooting? I think that is going to be the expectation that they can use an AI chatbot that will take them straight to the documentation that's relevant for what they're experiencing. I think people will experience that on other websites, and they'll come to our DevPortal looking for that same experience, and they want to go straight to the information that's going to help them troubleshoot the incorrect response they're getting or the error message they're getting.
So the art of asking questions is going to become the problem.
Yes, yeah, they're going to bring that that experience they had on the on another website to our developer portal and say, hey, where's your AI chatbot? How come it's not available to answer all my questions. And then I guess, you know, you asked what kind of problems people will run into despite the best expectations or the best efforts of the API documenters. And I think it's just too much text that, you know, people don't want to read. They don't want to read paragraphs. They just want to get straight to the point. They're looking for concise documentation.
Yes. And I'm asking Robert, who is yet again in a different situation, orchestrating a large documentation set as documentation magician. What do you see in this world?
Support is largely overlooked. It's been that way forever. We've made great strides in the portal. We made great strides in the quality of the APIs and the number of APIs, but not as much in the support. We're still taking, in my opinion, a 1980s approach to that. So everyone here touched, I think, on some of the aspects. I'd like to expand on a few others. So for instance, error messages. I believe error message has to be clear. This is the number. So if worse comes to worse, we can look it up. This is the cause of it. Give us the idea of what's going on, and give us a first clue. Give us a logical first step in debugging it. That would go a long way. A lot of devs don't like that. It's not romantic work. It's not interesting work. And they themselves don't encounter it a lot because they're the developers, and they know what to do. The other thing I see is I don't like FAQs. I think that just fragments the documentation. You know, look in two places for an answer. I believe in hardening the content of the document. Instead of having FAQ, put the issues in line inside the documentation itself. But this requires, this is harder to do because it's more time consuming on fewer and fewer data points. But one thing that we don't do, so I see a lot of conversations on forums, write the docs as an active one, and everyone's talking about the mechanics of creating a API suite, the new languages, the new applications that can. There's little conversation. There's less conversation about improving the quality of the documentation. Now, I believe my attitude is I advocate great documentation, and I define great documentation as being so clear that it defies misunderstanding. But to get there, you actually have to dog food your own application. You have to write I advocate making every call in Postman at the very least, so you know what's going on. But until you actually write an application using your own documentation, it's called dog fooding, you cannot understand the problems that the developers will encounter. Now, bugs are bugs. You can't work around that. You just have to report them. But not knowing what to do next, or getting an erroneous result because you fed it wrong data, that is almost 100% predictable. If you dog food your product and go literally by what your documentation says, that's the way I think that gets improved. When I can do that, and there's schedule and other concerns that would prevent that. But I've noticed when that happens, the support calls go down. The developers are more free to do what they need to do. So I don't want to sound like this is tough love, but I think time spent on content will always have a payoff.
I I'm not the only one nodding. I'm sure about
I
that.
noticed that.
Thank you. And I would like to squeeze just a little bit more time here. During the evaluations, there was conversation about governance, like, so API governance, okay, but that's an inside job. How do you see that it's actually working? And while we were talking about it, I think, Patricia, you asked this, and Swapnil gave a really, really cool answer. You said, if the behavior of the API and the documentation of the API is the same, then likely there is good governance in place. What are such telltales that there is a good, successful efforts towards governance and a unified portal? Let me ask Patricia first, because you were very much into this conversation. I remember it was really interesting for you.
Thanks. Well, one of the things that was so fascinating, of course, we all are looking at our own developer portal every day and we know it well. And then to look at somebody else's developer portal and see, now, what business are they in? What problems are they solving? What are the indicators that would tell me that this is a well-managed program, that I can feel confident using it? And I think we probably all took a little bit different away from that. But I think when you see the version history, release notes, you've seen it's been maintained recently. It's not a 2-year-old API that nobody's touched. When you see the status monitoring, what's the uptime percentage? Those were the ones that I really zeroed in on. And then another one I loved on one of the sites we looked at was a place somebody could make a suggested change to the documentation, either something that was not clear to them, or this doesn't reflect a recent update that I'm aware of, or what my user experience was, just ways for the user to very easily provide feedback about documentation. That was something that just gave me that much more confidence that the governance policy was solid. I know this whole group had a lot of opinions on that, so I don't want to monopolize that topic.
Swapnil, we even have an article published on some ideas of simplifying this waterfall of governance. Do you want to add something to this?
Yeah, sure. A shameless plug about my own my own work there, and the talk that I'm having at the conference today is also sharing some of the learnings that I've had. So typically, governance is an internal function, right? I mean, it's not for the external developers, but there are signs of a good governance in place that that can be seen from outside. It can be inferred from outside. Of course, say the say-do ratio, right? I mean, whatever that you say in the docs is exactly how we expect the APIs to behave. Whatever we test in sandbox is how we expect things to work in live. So there are gaps in all of these uh, experiences. Gives the impression that, okay, the governance is still not in place. But this is also true in just the experiences that the external developers gets to see. How consistent are your API experiences or artifacts? The docs that you have, API reference docs, Postman collections, SDKs, open API specs, change logs, and some of the things that Patricia mentioned, right? How consistent are they in terms of all of their APIs, all of their operations? And that gives some clue about how the governance functions inside is working. Also, in case of big, large enterprises who do mergers and acquisitions, we get to see sometimes that irrespective of where they have come from originally, they all share their work, their capabilities in a uniform, consistent way without leaking or shipping the org structures into them. So those are some of the indirect signs that I see if the governance functions inside is working really well. Uh, and there are so many learnings I've had over the years, many through failures of how not to do this, how not to scale this. So happy to share some of those learnings as well. But it is key. Governance even though it's an inside functions, I have been on both the sides of that equation. I have been governed, and now I'm in charge of making policies. So if it is not run correctly inside, it is more of a policing functions, and people will hate me for doing that if I'm not giving them the concrete guidance and the concrete tools to do the right thing that is curated in those policies. So anyway, just an inside bit from somebody who is in charge of large portfolios of managing and maintaining these multiple sets of APIs across the board.
Thank you. And Robert, I have seen you nodding a lot and you were smiling at some points. I guess you also have opinions on the matter.
On governance, it is a less interesting topic to me. Like you said, I do like the writing aspect. Unfortunately, there is the governance. So, but like everyone says, there's just a certain amount of overhead that has to be attended to. The style guides have to be in place and in enforcing this. You have to have regular reviews, and these have to be part of the of those reviews. So I really don't have much to add beyond what they said. It's an important aspect. It has to get done. It needs to be standardized, need to be objectified. This is one of the few areas that you can get metrics on what you're doing on API on API calls.
Thank you. My colleagues are warning me that we are running a bit fast with time, but I still would like to ask James, do you have insights beyond what the others said on overviewing a large API game?
Yeah. The only thing I would add when I think about like what are telltale signs of this would be really, and it depends on the portal, and it depends on the company and what they're selling and how they're selling it, right? But really like access to APIs and how easy is that and how efficient is that and what are the different ways I can get access and the billing, right? So it's like in my opinion, I think about it like the easier it is for me to get access, the quicker, the less information I need to provide, right? The more to me that's an indicator of they know what they're doing behind the scenes, right? They've probably assessed like, hey, what data is public, what data is data that we don't need a ton of information about them to access, and then what data is like, nope, not even going to happen, right? And they've done that work to create that experience. No one wants to say, hey, I'm working on this, I'm going to integrate with this API, I submit this request where I had to give way too much information, and now I have to wait 7 days. And then it gets rejected. And now I'm like, wait, what? Start over. So I really look at that as an indicator of really how well they're doing governance behind the scenes, honestly.
Thank you. And Rachel Lee, you have seen a lot of API programs, big ones, small ones, open, not open. What are the telltale signs of good governance?
Oh, to be honest, though, I've worked mostly with front-end development and open source code bases, which have a very different form of governance that you might find at enterprise. In that case, I think what I'm looking for is just a teensy-beensy bit different. What I tend to look for are things like working groups that have a dedicated scribe. I check out the GitHub repo to see if there have been, any edits to the documentation in the past, month or so, at least weeks. Especially, you want to see that the documentation repo and the actual product repo itself have the same levels of activity. If one of them is lagging, it indicates that something's out of sync. The documentation is not being updated, or perhaps the product is not being worked upon actively, even though its community may still be contributing to its documentation. So I look for parity between the documentation repo as well as the the documentation repo as well as the project repo. I guess you could think of it as sort of like the M&N test. You want to see that all of the, I don't know if you've heard of the the M&M test to make sure that things are well and truly in operation for big bands, etc. But look it up, it's pretty cool. In general, I look for that parity. I look to make sure that the tutorials can be run through. If your quick start can't be completed without errors in 5 minutes, it means that no one has completed that quick start in a while, or it would be updated. Experimental features need to be clearly labeled as such. Many open source projects struggle with denoting whether or not something is an experimental feature or in beta or there at all. So I look for that as well. If there's clear markings on things to indicate what version they're on, or if they're experimental, that's a very good sign. And lastly, but not leastly, most recent dependencies. If the dependencies are, for versions of things that are 3 years old, that's a smell. That's a major smell. Anyway, those are the things that I look for when I'm diving in on a new project, and lets me know that the people who are building the project are in sync with the people who are documenting it.
Thank you very much for sharing your opinions and advice so openly, and for all the work that you have put into looking through all of the portals.
Thank you so much for putting this wonderful event on. It was good to meet all of you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.